This is Dabu7. A heads up on what to expect here on January 20th, 2017, the day that Trump is set to get inaugurated. Now, what I've witnessed personally here the past year or so, couple years, is at most of these big events, protests that have happened in different cities, from Ferguson to Cleveland to Baltimore to D.C., and everything in between. These staged events have the same groups like BLM, RevCom, that show up out of the shadows, fully funded, ready to rock. And they always get to these places that all the rest of us seem to have a hard time getting to. Now, I want to remind you that when you start to see these people getting bussed in and showing up in D.C. by the tens of thousands, I want to remind you that time and time again throughout the years, we have attempted to get people up to D.C. to try to do something. Operation American Spring was one, where all kinds of people were supposed to get up there, but they didn't. And it was always the same excuse. And I get it. People can't leave work. They can't afford it. I see it time and time again. So if all of a sudden they're showing up, you have to ask the question, well, then how did they get there? And see, I would have never known any of this unless I would have put myself out there and experienced this firsthand. Unless I would have never went to Ferguson and seen the little groups huddling with their signs, 20 different groups waiting to jump in front of the mainstream cameras, like it's all a staged event. And then seeing other so-called media showing up and creating chaos, like flag burns, and all this stuff is planned just to get clicks and views, to cause chaos. And I've seen it with some of the biggest names out there, firsthand, right there in the streets, again and again. They will use the RNC, DNC, Ferguson, whatever it is, as a backdrop for their own stuff. And it's sick. And I've locked horns with many of them. And yeah, out here, they hate us for what we do. Even the BLM, they picked off Erick in Philly. As soon as he got on the ground, they targeted him, ran right up on him, tried to run him off the block because he was there to get the truth. Okay, well, we're going to have people peppered all over D.C. You're not going to know where, when, so many in different places that if something goes down, we're going to have eyes and ears there to see who did it, to follow them into the shadows. And it is a dangerous game. To see what buses they're getting off of, what hotels they're going back to, and to show you the sheer magnitude of this staged event that's going to go down under Disrupt J20, because this is involving RevCom, BLM, and who's been supporting them and funding them the whole time. Same George Soros that was backing Hillary in all the chaos that we witnessed at the RNC, DNC, all these events, everything that they do. It's all the other BLM events that have gone down, the chaos. Okay, the same people involved here, but more. So, D.C. and the hotels up there are not cheap and anywhere around. So to get all these people up there housed and to get them all busted, all this takes a big game plan. It would have had to have been far in advance, and it's going to take a lot of money to get all these people up there. And what's crazy is they've been doing all this and also paying them. So it's like a free ride to go cause chaos, and we're going to pay you to do it. We've seen that time and time again, exposing the paid protesters. Back in the beginning, it was people didn't want to believe it, till we started showing the checks and the people, and people just flat out admitting it. Time and time again that yes, they were getting paid to do it. And then you could see the Craigslist ads again and again and again, how staged all this stuff was. But then the reality of it is that we've tried to get to DC multiple times, and we have, but all the other people that were supposed to get there could not make it. So you have to look at the reality, guys. How did they get there? Who's paying for everything? When all these people swell into D.C. Okay? Because what they're doing here is they're targeting the Secret Service. They're targeting all kinds of stuff openly. Starting off at McPherson Square, as you see here. In the same old fashion, and I can guarantee I'm going to call it right now. You're going to hear the chants of BLM and all these other groups that you've heard at all these other staged events. You're going to hear them. And when you do, you remember I told you so. You remember who's really in D.C. under this order out of chaos motto that they have. Because that's all it's about. That's all it's about, dividing you and causing chaos. And that's the art of a false flag. It's to strip freedoms from people, to serve an agenda. Look at 9/11. Look at all these other things, Sandy Hooks and all these other shootings, and they want to come for guns, gun talk, this, that. The agendas behind everything they do. You can't tell me or prove to me otherwise, because I've seen the history and the track record for years now of who's been at every single one of these events, all these protests, all these staged events. I've seen who's been there, who's been behind it, who's been funding it, and the same goons will be there January 20th in D.C. That's what I'm warning you. We're going to have eyes and ears all over the place, coming out of the shadows just to keep a bead on what's going down. That way, if someone does want to pull something off and the mainstream wants to stage anything or try to engineer and script the storyline, well, guess what? We're going to have what was off frame. We're going to find out who these people really were. And there's so many people out there committed to getting the truth at this point that they're not going to stop it. So they can come to disrupt this whole thing and say, oh, this is against Trump and blah, blah, blah. But I'm telling you, this is part of a staged event, a bigger picture. Okay, by the same hands that have been behind this the whole time. Okay, and when they're openly saying that they're going to try to go up against the lines of the Secret Service and they're going to be bringing drums in and all this other stuff, they're going to be coming in days in advance of this, setting up shop, staking out places. And let me remind you that Lincoln Memorial and other places, they're saying that they're cut off. They're roping them off. They're not allowing people to go in there. They've shrunk down the area to where only so many people are going to be able to fit in there. So I'm going to update more as we approach this date with some aerial shots, some looks at the National Mall, the mall there, the White House, the whole nine, the areas they're going to shut down, the areas that are going to be open. We'll look at some of the closest hotels around, other places, other main squares like McPherson, the march routes. We'll outline it all so people know, you can be prepared, and you can be expecting that if something goes down, you know who did it. Okay, so this is different than having your everyday people, is what I'm trying to get through to you. This is different than having everyday people do this. And that's the whole point in their eyes, is to use the fake stuff to strip freedoms before the day Americans ever truly do make rise. Do you see? And this is a big stage in D.C., the day of his inauguration. It's a lot of energy is going to be behind this. And I'm telling you, a lot of big money and their goons are behind this. Just be aware, folks. Can't stress it enough. Anytime they have a hashtag involved that they've created, they've been pushing, I'm telling you, there's a lot of money that's been put into this already. And I wouldn't be surprised if they've already got people on the ground up there, set up shop in places. But all we can do is remain vigilant. You have to use discernment. You have to remember, if anything does happen during this event, sit back and look at the bigger picture. Look at what the mainstream media is saying, how they're trying to spin it, what agenda or whatever they're trying to go after almost immediately out of it. Let's hope something super crazy does not happen in terms of people trying to get out here and pop off some kind of weapon or anything like that. Even fireworks or something that could sound similar to shots or anything to provoke mass panic. Anything along those lines. Think about it. It's almost like they're fomenting at the mouth, waiting for something like this. And I truly feel that the RNC and DNC, they were targeting them and they backed out. They did. They truly did, because of all the people out there playing their part. Yes, you guys. You did damage in getting the truth and information out there and letting people know that if anything happens here, that it's going to be these groups. And people were waiting, especially in Cleveland, just waiting. Like, they show up here, we got them. But they backed out. And they even put out an official statement after that saying, well, look, we backed out. We're saving all of our steam for later events. Well, what's the later event? This one. You betcha. So the last thing I want to see is some staged BS by some goons and people not aware of it, and then them take freedoms from all of us. Don't you think that that's important? I do. So I will continue to update on this. And like I said, I'm going to get a look at the bigger picture, an aerial shot. I'm going to, knowing that the Lincoln Memorial and other places have been ruled cordoned off, so to speak. They're going to rope them off. People are not going to be allowed to go down in there. It's going to make the area smaller. We're going to have to look at those areas, all the squares, the route, the whole nine, and we're going to have eyes and ears coming out the shadows up here for this one. Just because if we don't, anything that happens, the mainstream media can try to portray it as anything they want. If we got people there that can see it for what it really is, that's when we get the truth. It's also dangerous. We've already been targeted. Keep that in mind as well. Shout outs to everyone out there fighting the good fight. I will leave a link below. You can read some details into this, and I will continue to update with more info as I come across it. Make sure you're following me on Twitter as well. A lot of big updates and information goes out exclusively there. All hands on deck. January 20th will be all eyes on DC. That's for sure. Just don't fall for the antics and the lies. This has been Dabu7, and this is Illuminati.